Hi everybody. Good morning everyone. Earlier today a cyclone watch has been issued for southeast Queensland, and we have some important messages today to share with the people of this great state. The watch area overnight has tightened slightly. It remains a very broad watch area, but it's between Fraser-Gary Island and to the Queensland border. In fact, it's to Grafton in northern New South Wales, but for the Queensland coast, everywhere from the border all the way to Fraser-Gary Island. The flood watch remains. That's for the Mary River, again, all the way south of the Mary. And those catchments in many cases are very full, and therefore we're asking residents to stay up to date with the flood watch as well. Overnight and again this morning, the modelling has indicated the likelihood of a cyclone crossing the Queensland coast has increased, and it's important for us to share that message with Queenslanders and ensure that Queenslanders understand the scenario that they are facing. My message to Queenslanders today is please be prepared. We are putting all the preparations in place, and we're asking Queenslanders to do the same. And it is important that people take the event seriously, that they stay up to date with warnings, and Queenslanders need to know if they do that, they will be able to get through the event, and as a state we'll be able to come out the other side of this. We're asking a large portion of the population to stay connected, and that's one of the complications and one of the things that we're very keen to share the messaging as clearly and consistently as we can, and we will continue to update Queenslanders as information comes to hand. But we're dealing with a very heavily populated part of the state, a state that hasn't seen a cyclone for many, many years, in fact many decades, get this close to the coast, or predicted to. And so it is important that Queenslanders absorb those messages so that we can continue to relay them to the state. The situation as we find it, Tropical Cyclone Alfred sits about 450 kilometres east of Brisbane. Now, overnight it intensified to a Category 2. In recent hours it has gone back to a Category 1, but that yo-yoing is expected to continue, and the modelling is showing it re-intensifying to a Category 2. So the message remains that all of those models are showing the cyclone at some stage in the next 24 hours start to head towards the Queensland coast in that area, as I said, between Fraser-Gary Island and the border. There are 3 stages of this expected event, and we're asking Queenslanders to be mindful of them. The first is big surf and erosion. The second is the potential for those damaging winds. And the third is the complexity that comes with that flooding. And all 3 of those present a challenge, and therefore we're asking people to stay connected throughout this process. Right now we're seeing the early stages of those waves and that erosion. I mentioned yesterday about some of the waves that we've seen off the coast of the Wide Bay, approaching that 14 and 15 metre swell. Well, off Brisbane today we are expected to see waves north of 4 metres, and that gives you an indication that despite the fact it's a long way out, there are some complexities we have to bear in mind. I want to unpack our immediate priority areas. Firstly, it's the islands and those bay communities. Anyone who lives on those bay islands, people who are on houseboats, we're asking them to now begin with earnestness and with a degree of being connected to start making their plans and their consideration. We're asking them to stay connected with messaging. Ferry services are continuing at the moment, but that could change in the very near future. So we're asking people who live on those islands to make a conscious decision because there will come a time where you will have to have made that decision to either leave or stay. And once that window closes, we will then support people in whatever decision they make, but it is important that they make that decision fairly soon because that window will close. I mentioned before that we're preparing, and that's why we're asking Queenslanders to do the same. We are using that window at the moment to prepare those islands. So we are pre-positioning things like generators, which will be very important in whatever instance this manifests and whatever they are needed for, and I'm talking about things like power and sewerage and telecommunications, we are pre-positioning workers like health workers onto those islands in the event they are needed. So I want Queenslanders who live on those islands to do the same. The second immediate priority area are those low-lying coastal areas. I'm talking about people who might live on canals or on beachfront properties, those lower-lying coastal areas across that zone, to also begin thinking about their plans. And I just want people to stay up to date. We have been asking the councils to provide us with some of their storm surge data, and that will be important for all of us to communicate with residents. Because the timing of that crossing remains variable, there is the prospect that it could cross on a high tide. Now that would provide a real complexity. That would provide some storm surge issues, and therefore we're asking people in those low-lying communities to stay up to date, but also begin your preparations in the event that that was to occur. Storm surges are a significant concern, and we are asking people to begin their preparation in that regard. A particular area of concern, not the only area, but a particular area of concern is Golden Beach. We've been speaking with the Sunshine Coast Council. There has been some active sandbagging at the Powerboat Club, but because of some of the breakthroughs at the northern part of Bribie, the impact on that area through the Pumicestone Passage remains real. And we're asking residents to consider what the impacts could be on their home. Now again, we've asked Council to provide us their most up-to-date modelling on what storm surge could look like, and when we have that, we will share that with Queenslanders. The Council will be doing the same. But there is an added layer of complexity because of the protection that that part of the island gives, and the fact that it may not be at the level that people have seen in over the years. I mentioned about the pre-deployment of assets and infrastructure. We will continue to do that. That's everything from workers in the power space, health workers. We're doing everything we can to make sure that we are as well prepared for this event as we can be, and we're asking residents to do the same. Other focus areas. I mentioned to you yesterday about things like telecommunications, power, and those utilities. We've again had the telcos this morning join the Queensland Disaster Coordination Group, and again we've asked the telcos to do all they can to provide extra capacity to be able to put messages out. They have told us that they won't be doing any of those planned maintenance on the service, which will make sure that they have all of the capacity that they have, and they're looking for every opportunity to do it. There could come the time where we need to send out many millions of text messages in a very short window, and it's important that the telcos are able to do that as quickly as they can. Text messages will not be the only source of information. It's one source, but please stay connected. I'll mention a little later on some of those websites, but it is important that people take every opportunity to stay connected. Today, it's important, if you're watching this broadcast, or indeed if you've been staying up to date with it, just talk to your colleagues at work, sing out to the neighbour at home, just make sure that people are aware of this. We have got ahead of this, and we do have a bit of time to prepare, but it is important that everybody knows that this is a serious impact, and the modelling does show that it is likely to cross the coast, and therefore we want people to be as well prepared as they can be. Turning now to schools. As we did recently in the North Queensland event, it's my intention to give people as much notice as possible so they can plan what they do with their kids. And schools and school closures in the past has been an area of concern, so we're trying as best we can to provide clarity in that messaging. Schools are open tomorrow, and it's important that people know that. We will update each afternoon what is happening for the following day. There is a website, and if you Google School Closures Queensland, that website gives you in real time what is happening. Obviously there's the state schools, which we put the information in. There's also the Catholic and independent schools. That is third-party info that comes to us. But both those sectors have been excellent to deal with, and we will use their information that comes to us. Individual schools will also give that messaging to you, but we will try to give that message the day before so that people are able to make plans, because there's no doubt that there obviously is disruption if you aren't able to drop your kids off at school, so we'll do as best as we can to do that ahead of the game. Turning to transport, given the marine conditions, shipping operators off Mooloolaba have been suspended until further notice. I know that there's some interest in the cruise ships. There are currently three cruise ships off our coast, and we are assisting them. I've just received some information only in the last couple of minutes. Two of those are looking for alternate ports, and we'll assist them in that. One will be endeavouring to come into the Port of Brisbane and offloading those passengers. We'll do everything we can to assist them in that regard, as well as those other two, and we'll keep you posted about that. City Cats and local ferries, we'll continue to work with the council and give information. Those services continue to operate, and we're just asking people to stay connected, and we will work with council on that. Airports and flights. There are very good procedures in place. The airports and indeed the airlines are well versed with working with the Bureau to determine when services will be suspended. Stay up to date with that information. They will communicate that with their passengers, but at this stage those services remain ongoing. I know that there's some interest in supermarkets and the stock on the shelves. We're working with those supermarkets and urging them to continue to resupply multiple times a day, give everyone the opportunity to get the essentials. And it is important that people do that, and they find every opportunity to look to have those essentials, get all of your personal items in one place, do everything you can to prepare for the prospect of loss of power, for example. Curbside collection, we're asking councils to communicate that to residents. I want to thank Brisbane City Council for the way that they have fast-tracked their current large waste curbside collection. They are endeavouring to get as much of that picked up in the first half of the week, which will certainly reduce the opportunity for loose items, which could be projectiles, and I want to thank Lord Mayor Adrian Schrinner and the council for that. Sporting events, we are continuing to work closely, whether that be with the sporting teams, the community groups, the concerts. We will give them information, and they will communicate that directly with their ticket holders. It's important that we give them that information, and we're urging them to make a call and communicate that. Obviously, today is Monday. I'm mindful that there are some things and significant things happening in the second half of the week, so we are working with all of those sporting groups and clubs and the venues to allow them to make those communications. Just finally, before I hand over to Sue from the Bureau, there are some websites which are of use for people, and I mentioned yesterday disaster.qld.gov.au, so that disaster website, that will give people live information, and it's important information. For those people who haven't been through a disaster before, the Get Ready Queensland website, getready.qld.gov.au, it's very good in terms of the preparation. So it talks about, it gives those local disaster dashboards, but it also gives information around sandbagging, which is something that is useful, gives some helpful tips about how to get ready. Finally, just turning to what we are experiencing. This is certainly an event that doesn't happen a lot for this part of the state, but it isn't unprecedented, and I am asking Queenslanders to be ready for it. And history shows it can happen. We had a Category 1 cyclone in 1990, that was Zoe, came very, very close to the coast, at near the Gold Coast. In 1974, we had Zoe, which was a Category 2, which crossed over Coolangatta. And in 1954, what's known as the Great Gold Coast Cyclone, predated the categories, but residents will, long-term residents know how severe that system was. So we're asking people to do all you can to prepare, in the knowledge that we are doing the same. We are working well with councils, we are working well with the federal government, we are taking this event seriously, we're asking people to do the same, and if you do heed the warnings, if you do stay connected, I have every confidence that we will get through the event, and I'm just grateful for people to stay connected in the days ahead. Thanks very much, and I'll hand over to Sue.
Thank you, Premier, and good afternoon, everyone. As you've just heard from the Premier, Tropical Cyclone Alfred will continue to impact southern Queensland for the remainder of this week. And by that, we mean hazardous conditions about the coast, damaging to potentially destructive winds, and heavy to locally intense rainfall leading to flooding and flash flooding. Currently, Tropical Cyclone Alfred is located off the Queensland coast and, as the Premier said, about 450 kilometres northeast of Brisbane. The system has weakened during this morning and at the 10 a.m. issue was a Category 1 system. And this is only a slight weakening from the Category 2 system in which it was maintaining in the overnight period. In regards to movement, the system is currently moving in a southeasterly direction at 20 kilometres per hour, and this is slightly away from the coast. But as you're well aware and as you have been informed over the last 24 hours, we are expecting a recurvature of Tropical Cyclone Alfred in the next 24 hours, in which it will start to make a westward track towards the Queensland coast during Tuesday morning. There's also signs that Tropical Cyclone Alfred can re-intensify, and we are expecting a Category 2 system heading towards the coast with more confidence of a likely coastal crossing of TC Alfred later into the week, and that looks most likely Thursday or Friday. So in regards to hazards in which this system will bring to coastal areas, we can expect further damaging surf conditions and abnormally high tides about the coast from around about 1770 down to the Queensland border. And we have observed that in the last couple of days, and we are expecting several more days of those conditions along the coast. So this, of course, is resulting in treacherous conditions for beachside recreational activities, significant coastal erosion, and inundation of foreshore areas. In addition to the coastal conditions, Tropical Cyclone Alfred will bring damaging winds with the expectation that there are likely destructive winds. The damaging winds will commence later in the day on Wednesday, and there is currently a tropical cyclone watch for coastal areas from Sandy Cape to the Queensland border detailing this. As the system moves closer towards the coast, and with the understanding that intensification of the system is likely, those destructive winds are possible through Thursday and into Friday. Finally, Tropical Cyclone Alfred will bring heavy to intense rainfall to southern Queensland areas, and this will bring an increased risk of flash flooding and the likelihood of minor to widespread major flooding. We've currently got a flood watch current for areas from around the Bundaberg area south to the border, and that includes catchments from the Mary River through the Sunshine Coast rivers, includes the Brisbane River catchment, and down to our border catchment areas of the Logan and Albert rivers, and including the Gold Coast creeks and rivers. This situation continues to be an evolving situation, and we do advise communities to maintain an awareness of the current warnings and the advice provided by local authorities. Bureau warnings will be available on the Bureau website or via the Bureau app, or, as I said, through those local authorities who are assisting communities during this event.
Good morning. As you've just heard, we've had such a broad impact area, and each of our local government areas are facing their own unique challenges, and we have to consider and plan for every scenario that comes our way. Cyclones in southeast Queensland are not typical, but are not unprecedented, and for that reason we ask locals, particularly in around from that Fraser-Gari area right through to the border, to understand your local risks that apply to you. Use this time to prepare yourself, prepare your home. very simple things like securing loose items outside, your garden furniture, your umbrellas. Clear your gutters out now. We know that we're going to get intense rainfall. Consider putting your valuables, your passports, your important documents into a box that if you do have to leave your home, you can take these with you. They assist so much if you have to go to an evacuation centre, if you have to go to a bank. So please consider doing that. Stock up on your non-perishable items. Make sure that you've got battery-operated lights, that you have a battery-operated radio to stay in contact with our messaging. These are very simple things you can do as part of your emergency action plan to be prepared to assist us in making sure that we're prepared for this event. There's a couple of key focuses today, and one of them is around storm surge. We are working with every local council to deeply understand the impacts that storm tides could have on the areas, particularly around those foreshore areas between Noosa and the Gold Coast. We are really focusing in on those areas and understand those at-risk areas that could be significantly impacted. We'll continue to work with local government on that today, and we will join local government in messaging those areas that are at risk from that modelling. And you'll hear more about that over the next coming days. We're already seeing coastal impacts such as erosion along the foreshores, and we're already seeing large waves and strong winds. And the SES are already working with other emergency services to mitigate this through sandbagging and other preparations. But from Wednesday, we're also expecting to see heavy rain, which will start to cause flash flooding and potentially riverine flooding, and that's why those flood watches are in place. And this poses a separate risk to the storm surge and the heavy winds that we're expecting to see. So particularly in those low-lying areas, if you live in a low-lying area or a foreshore area, I ask that you start preparing your home, considering the impacts that this cyclone might have for you. As was mentioned by the Premier, our island communities are a particular focus of our disaster management system today. I spoke about it yesterday, and I ask our island communities to stay in contact with our messaging. And I ask anyone that lives on the islands to consider your own risk, consider your own health conditions, and consider whether or not you should stay or leave, and decide when you'll do that. There will come a point where it'll be too late to leave those islands. We're told at this stage, within the next 24 to 36 hours, we'll start to see those ferry and barge services cease to those islands. So if you are making the decision to leave and go and stay with family and friends, please do so. But if you stay, we'll ensure that we're there to support you. We are working with every district disaster group to ensure that our vulnerable communities have plans in place. So our vulnerable communities, I talk about our rough sleepers. I talk about people with urgent healthcare needs, people who potentially could be in isolated areas. We have plans in place to support you. Our number one priority during an event like this is safety and preserving human life. It's always been my priority as the State Disaster Coordinator, and we are actively working with our emergency services to ensure that our swiftwater rescue crews are ready, that our SES crews are ready, that we've pre-deployed ambulance staff, additional police, fire and rescue and health staff to those at-risk area and our island communities to not only keep those communities safe, but should those communities decide to leave their properties, that we can keep their properties safe. Secondly, we want to protect our critical infrastructure such as power, communications and sewerage. Our critical infrastructure providers are already working with our local government and pre-deploying generators and other equipment to our identified high priority sites. This is really important so that we can keep these critical areas like water and power and sewerage running, our communications running during the event, or if we do lose them during the event, that we're able to restore them as quickly as possible for the community. This morning I also received a briefing from SEQ Water regarding the operation of the dams in South East Queensland. And as we're aware that post the Commission of Inquiry, these dams are operated in line with those emergency action plans, and SEQ Water have assured me that they'll continue to engage with us so that appropriate messaging is distributed to those persons who are affected by those dams. My message to everyone in the impact zone is really clear. Whether it be flooding, storm surge, high winds or otherwise, please take your opportunity to prepare now, just like our emergency services are preparing, and staying in contact with our messaging right through the Get Ready Queensland website and also our disaster dashboards. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Mark Armstrong. I'm the Chief Officer for the Queensland State Emergency Service. The SES, along with other emergency services, has been preparing for a major severe weather event, and we've been preparing for the last week. We are operational already. We've had over 450 requests for assistance since Thursday, with most of those in the last 24 hours. The SES are preparing to move personnel, equipment and resources to support the communities where we think they will be needed, and that includes our storm damage repair teams, our floodboat teams and chainsaw teams. We're urging the people of Queensland in the affected areas to be prepared and to prepare themselves, to prepare their families and their neighbours. As mentioned already, tropical cyclones are different to the storms that we're used to seeing in southeast Queensland. Tropical cyclones may feature high sustained winds that come from different directions than what we're used to, but also the heavy rainfall and the associated flash flooding and riverine flooding risks. The time to prepare is now. And I want to talk in particular about sandbagging. Sandbagging early is better than doing it when the rain is falling and the wind is blowing. You can access the sandbagging locations run by local government. The best place to find information is the local government websites, or also the Get Ready Queensland website has important connections, links for advice on sandbagging, storm preparation and also tropical cyclone preparation. For an emergency, the SES helpline 132 500 can be called at any time to request SES assistance, particularly in an emergency or for vulnerable people. If it's a life-threatening situation, you are to call 000. But that number again for SES helpline 132 500. So as we, along with the communities, prepare, I want to acknowledge the work of our State Emergency Service volunteers, and I ask employers, and I thank those employers who've released their volunteers who work for them already to support our Queensland communities, and look forward to that support in the days and weeks to come. Thank you.
Hi there, Tony Wolfe, Chief Officer for Marine Rescue Queensland. We are prepared to support the coastal communities of South East Queensland. Marine rescue services have been mobilised between Bundaberg and Currumbin. These services will be delivered by Marine Rescue Queensland, Volunteer Marine Rescue and the Australian Volunteer Coast Guard Association. We have 22 vessels across 13 coastal bases. 18 of those vessels are specialist medical transport vessels. We urge any vulnerable people living in coastal or island communities or on vessels to consider their location and move early. Anyone living on vessels, please consider your safety and make decisions about that early. We're here to help in partnership with the Queensland Ambulance Service, the Queensland Police Service and the State Emergency Service. If it's an emergency and your life is in danger, please call 000. If you need waterside assistance, please call 131 MRQ, which is 131 677. Our services are delivered by dedicated volunteers and they are more than happy to come and help. To all the boaties in South East Queensland, please stay home. Ensure your vessels are safe and secure and go fishing on another day. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony.
Just in relation to dam releases,
Yeah.
I know the Commissioner spoke about that there, but obviously some of the rainfall totals that we might get are in the same ballpark as the 2011 and 2022 floods. Where are we at with dam releases?
Well, SEQ Water have got that emergency activation procedure. It was put in place after the Commission of Inquiry. And it's important that they communicate that with Queenslanders, because you've got a whole heap of people who are anxiously watching the forecast, and so are we. So I'm urging them to communicate and articulate with people when there will be releases and why that formula operates, and it's important that they share that and they're upfront and transparent about it.
What's the mechanics of the cyclone? Where's the modelling suggesting landfall will be?
Yeah, well, it's broad, so look, there's a few things. The exact timing, the exact location, the exact intensity, all of those models will differ. The one thing that the Bureau is telling us consistently is that the likelihood of it crossing the coast remains really high. And so there is that window between, call it Fraser, Gary Island, and the border. The current model, which you reported yesterday, the current model is showing somewhere around that Brisbane area, and that has remained reasonably consistent overnight. And my message to Queenslanders is to take it seriously, be prepared. We are being prepared, and we're asking you to do the same. And we'll continue to give information. And as the hours and the days roll on, the certainty about where it might cross and the strength it might cross will firm up. But now's the time to prepare. You don't have the chance to prepare in the remaining few hours. Now's the time to do all those little things that make a big difference at the pointy end of that system. And I've had a few people say to me, ask the question about, because this end of the state hasn't experienced cyclones before, what impact will that have? Well, I've seen how well South East Queensland has responded to flooding before. And whilst cyclones provide an added layer of complexity with the high wind velocity, in the end, the flooding is often the biggest concern, particularly to the southern part of the system. So it's very similar in terms of preparing yourself. It's very similar to make sure you get ready in case you don't have power, to have all your documents in a safe location, have tinned food and water, do all of those things. The next layer, because of the prospect of a cyclone crossing, do the little things around your house. So clean your gutters and remove the debris from your yard. But if Queenslanders stay connected, they will stay safe. And history has shown me that if people take it seriously, if they absorb the messages, if they share it with loved ones, family and friends, and they follow that through, people can stay out of harm's way in these events. And that's why information is really important, and that's why we'll share it in real time.
On the current modelling, when will it be too late for people to move on? When will it be too late for them to take steps to look after themselves?
Jack, it's a great question, but that determines that answer is determined by where you live. So, for example, if you're on one of the island community, your window will close possibly in the next day or so, because your ability to get off it will be taken away from you. That might be different for someone in another area. But that's why people just have to stay connected, and that's why we're asking councils to provide some of those modelling to give some of that confidence. To give you an indication of how seriously we are taking it, we are pre-deploying assets and people into those areas in the knowledge that we may not be able to get somebody there by tomorrow. So we're asking people to do the same.
With dam management plans, correct me if I'm wrong, it could be typically 100% if all gates are automated or open. I could be wrong with Ivanhoe.
Well,
if that's the case, is there enough storage right now to hold the amount of water coming our way?
The SEQ water and indeed Sunwater have procedures that they have to follow following the Commission of Inquiry. And I'm urging them to be upfront with people, explain what they are, explain what those percentages are, and explain when that occurs. And obviously things that impact that is potential for rainfall, when it does fall, where it falls, and how those dams that are interconnected relate and what they release first. But it's important that they share that with Queenslanders. That's my message to the water operators. Just one moment. But post-Commission of Inquiry, there were some very, very strong things that came out of that. And what it said is that it was up to the head flood engineer to determine based on percentages and rainfall as to when those releases occurred. Now, that's not a decision of myself or Shane.
That's you on where they're at.
Yeah, Shane and I both had a briefing this morning, and we've asked them to communicate that. It's important that they do. And obviously, the reason why the questions are so valid is there is water in the system at the moment, and you do have catchments that have had rain. So on the back of it, that has to be factored into their modelling, and we're asking them to explain that because that's important to people. You know, from the point of release to when you might see that in the CBD, there's a few days in that. So it's important that they're upfront with people, and as we are with our information. But I stress that is a decision of SEQ Water, and it is an independent decision, and that came out of that commission of inquiry.
Have they told you in your briefing this morning? Have they told you about any water releases or dam releases over the next 48 hours?
They will make that decision and communicate it, but no, we haven't been told when those releases will occur.
Why are they not here then to communicate that to people? People are very concerned about it.
Very much so, and I've asked that they do that. And as I said, it's important that that information happens, and we're asking them to put that communication out today.
Can South East Queensland homes handle the winds that are coming?
Yeah, it's a good question. Based on the severity of the system, I'd be very confident that it can.
You don't need to take windows or anything?
Well, those preparations as we get closer to the event, and at this stage, as I said, the system has yo-yoed between a 1 and a 2. We'll be upfront with people as to what that looks like, and we will also give information through the Get Ready website about what good preparation looks like. Good preparation is the same at one end of the state as the other, so make sure you don't have things lying around your house, make sure your gutters are clean. In terms of things like other levels of preparation, we'll be upfront with people as it gets closer. The big risk remains storm tide inundation for those lower lying areas. That's why the council modelling is so important. So we'll continue to put forward what those rain forecasts look like, and then we'll work with councils to communicate that. So it's important that as we get that information, that it is delivered quickly and in real time, and that can be a range of things, including going door to door. But at this stage, the best advice I can give people is stay connected. And if you do think that you've got a neighbour who either might be elderly or infirm, or someone who may not be as connected as you are, just go and talk to them about it and explain to them that this is something that you should be preparing for. We're doing the same, and Queenslanders should as well.
Will evacuation centres be open? Will evacuation centres be open in those low-lying coastal areas?
We have had the relevant minister ministers join us, because there's everything from evacuation centres to also displaced people, so that's both communities and housing. We'll continue to give that information. We're not at that point now. We are ahead of where we need to be, but as that information comes to hand, we'll speak to people. In the meantime, listen to the advice, prepare. I think Mark from the SAS gave some good advice around the best time to get ready for sandbagging is not when it's raining and windy. The best time is now if you think you're in a low-lying area. We'll continue to give that information. The biggest risk of these systems is always on the southern end. Now, we don't know where it's going to cross the coast yet, so it's important that people stay up to date.
Do you know yet what will happen with the AFL on Thursday?
I've spoken to the CEO of the Lions. I've spoken with many of the different groups. Now, we'll give them the information, and Lions and the AFL will be able to make an informed decision. We'll give them that, and there's plenty of time. It's Monday. They don't play until Thursday. This is for them to communicate, obviously, but there are always opportunities. There are always opportunities. I'm mindful that both teams have a bye on the same round in a few weeks' time, so that might be something that goes into their consideration. But I stress, I'm not a football administrator nor the CEO of the AFL. We will give them information as we give Queenslanders. It's not my style to bark orders at people. I want to give people information, and they will make informed decisions. And the one thing you can count on is we will give you the information as it comes to us. And if we do that, and people do take it seriously and prepare, I'm very confident about the resilience of Queenslanders. I really am. And yes, it's been over 3 decades since we've seen something like this, and half a century since a cyclone crossed the coast. But that doesn't make people in Queensland in the southern part incapable of handling it. I've seen how well they've handled floods, and I've got every confidence they will. If they prepare calmly, we give messaging in a clear and concise way, people will get through it, and I have every faith in that people getting through the other end.
And
Have you
given
been in
that we're
contact?
actually expected to hit Brisbane, is it going to come ahead of the cyclone touching down?
Well, so, I'm sorry, I didn't...
When is that rain expected to actually hit Brisbane?
Yeah, well, look, obviously, the system, and Sue explained this, the system does, people will start seeing signs of that increasingly in the days ahead. You're already seeing that. Some of those waves off Rainbow Beach were quite frankly huge, and we're seeing that now. Right across the coast, people are seeing the early signs of that, but there will be rain ahead of the system crossing. The biggest risk is on the southern part of the system. That's always the way, and history has shown us that. That's why we'll give as up-to-date information, and every day that goes by, the modelling firms. So at the moment, we're talking about somewhere between Fraser-Gary and the border. Every day, that will tighten a little. But people still need to be prepared. They still need to keep their wits about them, and if they do that, I'm very confident that things will be okay.
And will the building codes differ from Far North Queensland to Brisbane?
Yeah.
Will they Category 2 storm or Category 1 hit differently here than it will up north?
I'm very confident that people will be safe. I genuinely am. And we'll continue to give people information. If as the system gets closer, if it intensifies, we'll articulate that to people. But I am extremely confident if people heed the warnings and they do that they will be fine.
Have you found that a lot of businesses have moved or have already alerted their employees to work from home towards the end of the week?
Again, a good question, but that's for the individual business. And each business will take a different approach, and we'll give them that information. And if people do believe that's the best thing for their employee, well, they should do that. What we'll do is give people the information, and particularly how it relates to school, because that impacts parents massively. So you won't get a mad scramble where in the morning you'll get a frantic message that school's closed. The decision will be made on the day before and then updated on that morning so that people have every chance. And no system will ever be perfect, but if we give people as much warning as possible, that will help them be able to plan their lives. Likewise with the airports having to give messaging about what that looks like, because that's obviously completely as well.
What's the likelihood of school closures at this stage?
Oh, look, if the system is crossing the coast, very strong. And the modelling has shown that the likelihood of the system coming to the coast has firmed, and it's firmed every day. So, if that was to occur, well then we'll give that messaging and we'll make sure that it's across that area. But we're not at that stage yet. School is open tomorrow and kids should go to school, and parents should send their kids in the knowledge that they will have a full day tomorrow at school.
Have you been in contact with the Prime Minister,
Yes.
particularly about deployment of the army?
Yeah, yes, I have. We've got Major Sweeney joins us in our meetings every day. I've spoken to the PM. I've spoken to the opposition leader. It's important that everybody continues to play their role. And I have to make the point: the Federal Minister for Emergency Management was one of the first people on the phone. She dialed into the meeting yesterday, and we genuinely have a desire to work across all three levels of government. It's important that that happens, and if that does, it gives people the knowledge that things are well planned, that it's being dealt with in a calm and methodical manner, and it's important in whatever the recovery phase looks like that all three levels of government are rowing in the right direction. We've already spoken to Council about the importance of mobilising some of their contractors, for example, in areas, because if you do have a portion of debris or flood-impacted items, it's important that people see that the uplifting quickly. My view is post-disaster, whatever it looks like, what the community want to see is everybody taking it seriously and everybody doing their bit. Right now, we're in the other part of the phase, and that's preparation. And if you do that preparation, you minimise the need for your recovery. But whatever occurs, we'll be there for the long haul, and I'm very confident Queenslanders will get through it. I genuinely am.
Those Queenslanders that you spoke about
Yeah.
coming in, those three, is Brisbane their final destination?
Well, in the case of two of them, and Jacqueline and I just got this moments before, but in the case of two of them, they are looking for alternate ports. One of them, who has a pilot on board, will be coming into Brisbane and offloading those passengers. We'll update. No, I don't, but we'll update what those other two are as well.
Do you have concerns about panic buying at the supermarkets?
Yeah, but the message to the supermarkets is restock the shelves as much as you can, and Queenslanders to heed the warning and buy what they need. And that is an important part of the process. It is important that people have sufficient food and water, and I understand why Queenslanders want to do that. That's important, and it's important for the supermarkets to do their bit as well.
Should people be preparing for days without power?
It's you've been around long enough, Jack. You know how disasters work. It depends the severity of it, but you should prepare to be without power, and you should prepare to have your bottled water, and you should have your spare batteries, spare charger for your phone, and you should have batteries for a radio. You should have all your documents in one location. There's no harm preparing and then not needing it. The harm is in not doing the work, and then when things become in a perilous situation, if it gets to it, not being ready. So just do the little things. If you do the little things, people will get through it, and I have every faith in that. So,
is Queensland Police and Queensland Fire looking to move personnel from up north down south to increase numbers?
Very much so, as will Ergon, and we saw the same in reverse less than a month ago. And that's the joy of the way our system works. And we are a very decentralised state. That provides challenges, it also provides opportunities. And I might also take the opportunity to also thank the local government sector, councils who are getting help from councils who are in the firing line now are already returning the favour. And I think that shows a lot about the way that people work together in events like this. And just on that, to the residents of North and Far North Queensland, your recovery will continue. This is a very important that we prepare the other end of the state, but the work on the recovery continues. We're continuing to meet. We've got the coordinators on the ground, and we are making sure that we stay true to the things we spoke about the rebuild and embedding resilience. We've already spoken about an individual fund to help homeowners who have been impacted. That's rolling out quicker than ever before. So we are focused at both ends of the state, and they're at different stages. One's picking up the pieces and doing it with true grit and determination. The other is heeding the warnings and getting ready for whatever comes their way. But one thing's for certain is it's a testing time of year, but it's a state that's full of people with a hell of a lot of ticker.
Has there been any progress on any state government support for Star Casino?
I'm just going to, before we go to that, and I will go to that, are there any more questions disaster related? Because I'm mindful there are people who are dialing in for that. Yes?
Yeah, just wanted to touch on panic buying supermarkets
Yeah.
again.
Yes.
What are the contingency plans there? You mentioned you've spoken to some of the major providers.
Yes. We have. The Deputy Premier leads that, and he has been on the phone for a couple of days now. The challenges with what we saw in North and Far North Queensland was around the lack of connectivity. That doesn't exist in the southeast, and it certainly doesn't exist now. So my message to the supermarkets would be get in and serve your customers and restock the shelves and do all you can. That's important. We're asking Queenslanders to do the right thing, and that means the supermarkets have to as well. Anything else on this? No, I've got to get this. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Jacqueline.
Yeah, has there been any progress on discussions with Star about state government support?
I want to be clear. I made my point from the beginning of this. We're not talking about any form of financial assistance for a casino operator. That's never been our focus. Our focus is on talking to the next stage, whoever is running that entity, administrator, future purchaser, special manager, whatever format that looks like. My only focus is on the doors being kept open and people being able to go to work. And if that happens, we'll do all we can to make sure that we can get a future owner when it gets to that stage. But there's money that's owed to Queenslanders. That money will be paid. And our only focus is not on the viability of a company or anything like that. Our focus is on the workers, and nothing's going to change in that regard.
Obviously, there's an administrative broadie.
Yeah.
The likelihood would be there would be some job losses as they seek to
Sure.
strip back the operation. So the alternate school of thought is you actually give them those tax considerations because they're not going to pay the tax anyway if they do go bust.
Well,
so you give it to them in the hope that you might get it down the line, and there are some job protections in the meantime.
Yep, so our non-negotiable is the place stays open. And if the place stays open, that means that there will be a continuity of employment, and that's useful. In fact, it's essential. There's money that's owed to Queenslanders, and we'll be insisting that that's paid. And as for the future, and there are a number of things that we can do, including there's future stages of that asset. In fact, there should be a lot more, but that was handed over, but that's a story for another day. Our non-negotiable is the place has to stay open. We are willing to work into the future, but debts must be paid, people must be able to go to work, and we're not budging on that.
Tax deferment's off the table.
Well, I've got to, first of all, I've got a responsibility to the workers to let them know that they are our number 1, 2 and 3 priority, and we're not moving on that. And I've said that the whole way through. What the future looks like and what a future purchaser might need on that site, I'm sure they'll put that bid forward. But there's money that's owed to Queenslanders, and that's money that we'll be getting. And there's a whole heap of workers there at both casinos, Gold Coast and Brizzy, and those workers need to know they've got a job. And we are not for turning on that. And I have not changed my language from day one, even before we knew Star's position.
The workers we've spoken to say they want to see some actual detail about how they are going to support it, rather than they just are going to be supported.
Well, I'll tell you how. By making sure that it's a non-negotiable, that if that place closes, any option for future partnerships gets removed off the table. And that's been pretty definitive. And I have to say the union's been pretty good to deal with as well. And we're on a unity ticket on this one. I've lost no sleep over the company called Star. I think a lot about the workers though, and my non-negotiable is that they stay in a job. And whoever runs that asset needs to know that if our willingness to be good partners and assist is all predicated on one thing, and that is the workers being paid. And the next thing is money that's owed to Queenslanders need to be paid back as well.
Just to clarify, you're on the side of the unions here?
Well, I'll work with anyone who cares about working class people. I don't think that shouldn't surprise you. There's only been one union you've ever seen me say bad things about. It starts with C and it ends with U. Thanks very much.